Greetings, 12:05 in the AM, midnight scriptures in the Sunshine State, May 19th, 2022, in the year of our Lord. Hallelujah. We finished reading the first book of Samuel yesterday. And as I said before in my prior videos, I would like to, if I start a book, finish it before the week. So Saturday, I have till Saturday, so I'm starting 2 Samuel. And then let's say if I finish it Friday, I have the choice to start another book Saturday, and I could continue on, of course, but I can just have that day off as well, and then start Sunday or Monday, Basically, there is no off days with this, it's just something I want to do. It's just something I'm doing. And this is something I will continue to do for the rest of my life. And that is to read the Word of God, because it's never going to change, and it will always be here. And this matters. I met a woman today, MJ, at the beach on the boat, and from church, and man, she's a very nice girl, and she told me she just got saved, and I was like, wow, that's great, awesome to hear. And she was telling me how much of a change it is, and she did say it's hard. I'm like, yeah, you know what, it is hard. Why? Because this is the most realest thing you can do. This is the most truest thing we have. It's the most realest thing you can ever do, is serve God with all your heart. What's the greatest commandment? Let's look it up. Let's go to Matthew real quick. Matthew. I think it's 22. So I'll just read this passage real quick. We're actually getting some New Testament today. New Testament, the first book of the New Testament is Matthew. I'm reading chapter 22, verses 34 through 40. The greatest commandment. Who's the greatest basketball player? Michael Jordan, in my opinion. I think he's the greatest, right? Now, this is the greatest commandment. So out of all of them, this is the greatest, right? Verse 34, hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. One of them, an expert in the law, tested him with this question. Stop right there. Expert in the law. Which was what the Pharisees were. Tested him with this question. Verse 36. Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. Verse 38. This is the first and greatest commandment. I'm going to stop right there. When I read this verse, again, back last year, when I was at Colorado Christian University, and right before that, I had asked God, what does that look like? That's my whole being. That's everything I am, everything I have, is to be for the Lord, is to be for God, the scriptures. Verse 39, and the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. What do you want to do when you see someone hurting? You want to tell them the truth, right? You want to tell them, don't go that way. You see someone about to fall in a 5-foot hole, wouldn't you want to tell that person, hey, look, watch where you're stepping. I don't want you to fall in that hole. I'd want some friends like that. I want some people close that would tell me, hey, don't do that, man. You don't want to go that route. You don't want to go through that. It's not good. And shout out to Peter from California, Calvary Chapel Montebello. We had a certain experience where he did that to me, and I wasn't being a friend and listened to him at that time, but he was being a great friend and trying to warn me. So shout out Peter. Verse 40. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. All right, let's get started. 2 Samuel, the book of 2 Samuel, chapter 1. David hears of Saul's death. Verse 1. After the death of Saul, David returned from striking down the Amalekites and stayed in Ziklag 2 days. On the third day, a man arrived from Saul's camp with his clothes torn and dust on his head. When he came to David, he fell to the ground to pay him honor. Where have you come from? David asked him. He answered, I have escaped from the Israelite camp. What happened? David asked. Tell me. The men fled from the battle, he replied. Many of them fell and died, and Saul and his son Jonathan are dead. Verse 5. Then David said to the young man, who brought him the report? I like that. He's trying to know, where are you getting this information? How do you know that Saul and his son Jonathan are dead? Verse 6. I happened to be at Mount Gilboa. And the young man said, and there was Saul, leaning on his spear, with the chariots and their drivers in hot pursuit. When he turned around and saw me, he called out to me, and I said, what can I do? He asked me, who are you? An Amalekite, I answered. Then he said to me, stand here by me and kill me. I'm in the throes of death, but I'm still alive. Verse 10. So I stood beside him and killed him, because I knew that after he had fallen, he could not survive. And I took the crown that was on his head and the band on his arm, and have brought them here to my lord. Then David and all the men with him took hold of their clothes and tore them. They mourned and wept and fasted till evening for Saul and his son Jonathan, and for the army of the Lord, and for the nation of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. David said to the young man who brought him the report, where are you from? I am the son of a foreigner, an Amalekite, he answered. David asked him, why aren't you afraid to lift your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed? Verse 15. Then David called one of his men and said, go strike him down. So he struck him down, and he died. For David had said to him, your blood be on your own head. Your own mouth testify against you when you said, I killed the Lord's anointed. David's lament for Saul and Jonathan. Verse 17. David took up this lament concerning Saul and his son Jonathan, and he ordered that the people of Judah be taught this lament of the Baal, parentheses. It is written in the book of Jashar, close parentheses. Verse 19. A gazelle lies slain on your heights, Israel. How the mighty have fallen. Tell it not in Gath. Proclaim it not in the streets of Ashkelon. Lest the daughters of the Philistines be glad. Lest the daughters of the uncircumcised rejoice. Mountains of Gilboa, may you have neither dew nor rain. May no showers fall on your terraced fields. For there the shield of the mighty was despised. The shield of Saul no longer rubbed with oil. From the blood of the slain, from the flesh of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan did not turn back. The sword of Saul did not return unsatisfied. Saul and Jonathan, in life they were loved and admired, and in death they were not parted. They were swifter than eagles. They were stronger than lions. Verse 24. Daughters of Israel, weep for Saul, who clothed you in scarlet and finery, who adorned your garments with ornaments of gold. How the mighty have fallen in battle. Jonathan lies slain on your heights. I grieve for you, Jonathan my brother. You were very dear to me. Your love for me was wonderful, more wonderful than that of woman. How the mighty have fallen. The weapons of war have perished. That completes chapter 1. Chapter 2. David anointed king over Judah. Verse 1. In the course of time, David inquired of the Lord, "Shall I go up to one of the towns of Judah?" he asked. The Lord said, "Go up." David asked, "Where shall I go?" "To Hebron," the Lord answered. So David went up there with his 2 wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. David also took the men who were with him, each with his family, and they settled in Hebron and its towns. Then the men of Judah came to Hebron, and there they anointed David king over the tribe of Judah. When David was told that it was the men from Jabesh Gilead who had buried Saul, he sent messengers to them to say to them, "The Lord bless you for showing this kindness to Saul your master by burying him. May the Lord now show you kindness and faithfulness, and I too will show you the same favor because you have done this. Now then, be strong and brave, for Saul your master is dead, and the people of Judah have anointed me king over them." War between the houses of David and Saul. Verse 8. Meanwhile, Abner, son of Ner, the commander of Saul's army, had taken Ish-bosheth, son of Saul, and brought him over to Mahanaim. He made him king over Gilead, Ashuri, and Jezreel, and also over Ephraim, Benjamin, and all Israel. Verse 10. Ish-bosheth, son of Saul, was 40 years old when he became king over Israel, and he reigned 2 years. The tribe of Judah, however, remained loyal to David. The length of time David was king in Hebron over Judah was 7 years and 6 months. Abner, son of Ner, together with the men of Ish-bosheth, son of Saul, left Mahanaim and went to Gibeon. Joab, son of Zeruiah, and David's men went out and met them at the pool of Gibeon. One group sat down on one side of the pool and one group on the other side. Verse 14. Then Abner said to Joab, "Let's have some of the young men get up and fight hand to hand in front of us." "All right, let's do it," Joab said. So they stood up and were counted off, 12 men for Benjamin and Ish-bosheth, son of Saul, and 12 for David. Then each man grabbed his opponent by the head and thrust his dagger into his opponent's side, and they fell down together. So that place in Gibeon was called Helkath Hazurim. The battle that day was very fierce, and Abner and the Israelites were defeated by David's men. The 3 sons of Zeruiah were there: Joab, Abishai, and Asahel. Now Asahel was as fleet-footed as a wild gazelle. He chased Abner, turning neither to the right nor to the left as he pursued him. Abner looked behind him and asked, "Is that you, Asahel?" "It is," he answered. Then Abner said to him, "Turn aside to the right or to the left. Take on one of the young men and strip him of his weapons." But Asahel would not stop chasing him. Again Abner warned Asahel, "Stop chasing me. Why should I strike you down? How could I look your brother Joab in the face?" But Asahel refused to give up the pursuit. So Abner thrust the butt of his spear into Asahel's stomach, and the spear came out through his back. He fell there and died on the spot, and every man stopped when he came to the place where Asahel had fallen and died. But Joab and Abishai pursued Abner, and as the sun was setting, they came to the hill of Ammah near Giah, on the way to the wasteland of Gibeon. Then the men of Benjamin railed behind Abner. They formed themselves into a group and took their stand on top of a hill. Verse 26. Abner called out to Joab, "Must the sword devour forever? Don't you realize that this will end in bitterness? How long before you order your men to stop pursuing their fellow Israelites?" Verse 27, Joab answered, "As surely as God lives, if you had not spoken, the men would have continued pursuing them until morning." So Joab blew the trumpet, and all the troops came to a halt. They no longer pursued Israel, nor did they fight anyone. All that night Abner and his men marched through the Arabah. They crossed the Jordan, continued through the morning hours, and came to Mahanaim. Verse 30. Then Joab stopped pursuing Abner and assembled the whole army. Besides Asahel, 19 of David's men were found missing, but David's men had killed 360 Benjamites who were with Abner. They took Asahel and buried him in the father's tomb at Bethlehem. Then Joab and his men marched all night and arrived at Hebron by daybreak. That completes chapter 2. Chapter 3, verse 1. The war between the house of Saul and the house of David lasted a long time. David grew stronger and stronger, while the house of Saul grew weaker and weaker. Sons were born to David in Hebron. His firstborn was Amon, the son of Ahinoam of Jezreel. His second, Caleb, the son of Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. The third, Absalom, the son of Maacah, daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur. The fourth, Adoniah, the son of Haggith. The fifth, Shephatiah, the son of Abital. And the sixth, Ithram, the son of David's wife, Eglah. These were born to David in Hebron. Abner goes over to David. Verse 6. During the war between the house of Saul and the house of David, Abner had been strengthening his own position in the house of Saul. Now Saul had had a concubine named Rizpah, daughter of Aiah. And Ishbosheth said to Abner, "Why did you sleep with my father's concubine?" Abner was very angry because of what Ishbosheth said. So he answered, "I am a dog's head on Judah's side. This very day I am loyal to the house of your father, Saul and his family and friends. I haven't handed you over to David, yet now you accuse me of an offense involving this woman. May God deal with Abner, be it ever so severely, if I do not do for David what the Lord promised him on oath, and transfer the king from the house of Saul, and establish David's throne over Israel and Judah from Dan to Beersheba." Ishbosheth did not dare to say another word to Abner, because he was afraid of him. Then Abner sent messengers on his behalf to say to David, "Whose land is it? Make an agreement with me, and I will help you bring all Israel over to you." "Good," said David, "I will make an agreement with you, but I demand one thing of you. Do not come into my presence unless you bring Michal, daughter of Saul, when you come to see me." Verse 14. Then David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, son of Saul, demanding, "Give me my wife Michal, whom I betrothed to myself for the price of 100 Philistine foreskins." So Ishbosheth gave orders and had her taken away from her husband Paltiel, son of Laish. Her husband, however, went with her, weeping behind her all the way to Bahurim. Then Abner said to him, "Go back home." So he went back. Abner conferred with the elders of Israel and said, "For some time you have wanted to make David your king. Now do it, for the Lord promised David, 'By my servant David I will rescue my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines and from the hand of all their enemies." Verse 19. Abner also spoke to the Benjamites in person. Then he went to Hebron to tell David everything that Israel and the whole tribe of Benjamin wanted to do. When Abner, who had 20 men with him, came to David at Hebron, David prepared a feast for him and his men. Then Abner said to David, "Let me go at once and assemble all Israel for my lord the king, so that they may make a covenant with you, and that you may rule over all that your heart desires." So David sent Abner away, and he went in peace. Joab murders Abner. Oh no. Verse 22. Just then David's men and Joab returned from a raid and brought with them a great deal of plunder. But Abner was no longer with David in Hebron, because David had sent him away, and he had gone in peace. When Joab and all the soldiers with him arrived, he was told that Abner, son of Ner, had come to the king, and that the king had sent him away, and that he had gone in peace. So Joab went to the king and said, "What have you done? Look, Abner came to you. Why did you let him go? Now he is gone. You know Abner, son of Ner." He came to deceive you and observe your movements and find out everything you are doing. Joab then left David and sent messengers after Abner, and they brought him back from the cistern at Sirah. But David did not know it. Now when Abner returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside into an inner chamber, as if to speak with him privately. And there, to avenge the blood of his brother Asahel, Joab stabbed him in the stomach, and he died. Verse 28. Later, when David heard about this, he said, I and my kingdom are forever innocent before the Lord concerning the blood of Abner, son of Ner. May his blood fall on the head of Joab and on his whole family. But Joab's family never be without someone who has a running sore or leprosy, or who leans on a crutch, or who falls by the sword, or who lacks food. Verse 30, parentheses. Joab and his brother Abishai murdered Abner because he had killed the brother Asahel in the battle of Gibeon, close parentheses. Then David sent to Joab and all the people with them, tear your clothes and put on sackcloth and walk in mourning in front of Abner. King David himself walked behind the bier, B-I-E-R. They buried Abner in Hebron, and the king wept aloud at Abner's tomb. All the people wept also. The king sang this lament for Abner. Should Abner have died as the lawless die? Your hands were not bound, your feet were not fettered. You fell as one falls before the wicked. And all the people wept over him again. Verse 35. Then they all came and urged David to eat something while it was still day. But David took an oath, saying, May God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if I taste bread or anything else before the sun sets. All the people took note and were pleased. Indeed, everything the king did pleased him. So in that day all the people there and all Israel knew that the king had no part in the murder of Abner, son of Ner. Then the king said to his men, Do you not realize that a commander and a great man has fallen in Israel this day? Verse 39. And today, though I am the anointed king, I am weak, and these sons of Zeruiah are too strong for me. May the Lord repay the evil doer according to his evil deeds. That completes chapter 3. Little breaky break. Well, let's check how many chapters 2 Samuel has. 24. And my guess, the book after 2 Samuel is 1 Kings. I was right. 1 Kings. So there's 24 chapters. Okay. All right. Man, why am I hot? All right. Chapter 4. Let's bring this a little bit closer. All right. Ishbosheth murdered. Man, everyone's dying. Verse 1. When Ishbosheth, son of Saul, heard that Abner had died in Hebron, he lost courage, and all Israel became alarmed. Now Saul's son had two men who were leaders of raiding bands. One was named Baanah, and the other Rechab. They were sons of Rimmon, the Beerothite, from the tribe of Benjamin. Beeroth is considered part of Benjamin, because the people of Beeroth fled to Gittaim and have resided there as foreigners to this day. Verse 4, parentheses. Jonathan, son of Saul, had a son who was lame in both feet. He was 5 years old when the news about Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel. His nurse picked him up and fled. But as she hurried to leave, he fell and became disabled. His name was Mephibosheth, close parentheses. Verse 5, Now Rechab and Baanah, the sons of Rimmon the Beerothite, set out for the house of Ishbosheth, and they arrived there in the heat of the day, while he was taking his noonday rest. They went into the inner part of the house as if to get some wheat, and they stabbed him in the stomach. Then Rechab and his brother Baanah slipped away. They had gone into the house while he was lying on the bed in his bedroom. After they stabbed and killed him, they cut off his head. Taking it with them, they traveled all night by way of the Arabah. They brought the head of Ishbosheth to David at Hebron and said to the king, "Here is the head of Ishbosheth, son of Saul, your enemy, who tried to kill you. This day the Lord has avenged my lord the king against Saul and his offspring." David answered Rechab and his brother Baanah, the sons of Rimmon the Betherite, "As surely as the Lord lives, who has delivered me out of every trouble, when someone told me Saul is dead, and thought he was bringing good news, I seized him and put him to death in Ziklag. That was the reward I gave him for his news. How much more than wicked men have killed an innocent man in his own house and on his own bed? Should I not now demand his blood from your hand and rid the earth of you?" So David gave an order to his men, and they killed him. They cut off their hands and feet and hung the bodies by the pool in Hebron. But they took the head of Ishbosheth and buried it in Abner's tomb at Hebron. That completes chapter 4. Man, when I was thinking about this, was like, these times are wicked. Even though they were cutting off heads back then, and they still do it today, it seems though as if like it's better today than it was back in the day, because who knows what they were thinking. Jesus didn't come yet, right? Jesus had not appeared on the earth, so the mindset is completely different from what we have today, obviously, because we're reading all this, right? But and it's hard to imagine how they were just living their day-to-day lives, just like savages, man. I don't even know. I don't even know. All right. Chapter 5, David becomes king over Israel. Chapter 5, verse 1, all the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron and said, "We are your own flesh and blood. In the past, while Saul was king over us, you were the one who led Israel on their military campaigns. And the Lord said to you, you will shepherd my people Israel, and you will become their ruler." When all the elders of Israel had come to King David at Hebron, the king made a covenant with them at Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. David was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned 40 years. In Hebron, he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months, and in Jerusalem, he reigned over all Israel and Judah 33 years. David conquers Jerusalem. Verse 6, the king and his men marched to Jerusalem to attack the Jebusites who lived there. The Jebusites said to David, "You will not get in here. Even the blind and the lame can ward you off." They thought, "David cannot get in here." Nevertheless, David captured the fortress of Zion, which is the city of David. On that day of David, he had said, "Anyone who conquers the Jebusites will have to use the water shaft to reach those lame and blind, who are David's enemies. That is why they say, 'The blind and lame will not enter the palace.'" David then took up residence in the fortress and called it the City of David. He built up the area around it from the entrances inward, and he became more and more powerful because the Lord God Almighty was with him. Now Hiram, king of Tyre, sent envoys to David, along with cedar logs and carpenters and stonemasons, and they built a palace for David. Then David knew that the Lord had established him as king over Israel and had exalted his kingdom for the sake of his people Israel. After he left Hebron, David took more concubines and wives in Jerusalem, and more sons and daughters were born to him. These are the names of the children born to him there: Shammua, Shobab, Nathan, Solomon, you heard that right? Let's read that again. Verse 13. After he left Hebron, David took more concubines, he took more girls and wives in Jerusalem, and more sons and daughters were born to him. To who? To David. These are the names of the children born to him there: Shammua, Shobab, Nathan, Solomon, author of Proverbs, Ebar, Elishua, Nepheg, Japhia, Elishama, Eliada, and Eliphelet. David defeats the Philistines, verse 17. When the Philistines heard that David had been anointed king over Israel, they went up in full force to search for him. But David heard about it and went down to the stronghold. What is the stronghold? Now the Philistines had come and spread out in the valley of Rephaim. So David inquired of the Lord, "Shall I go and attack the Philistines? Will you deliver them into my hands?" The Lord answered him, "Go, for I will surely deliver the Philistines into your hands." So David went to Baal Perazim, and there he defeated them. He said, "As water breaks out, the Lord has broken out against my enemies before me." So that place was called Baal Perazim. The Philistines abandoned their idols there, and David and his men carried them off. Once more the Philistines came up and spread out in the valley of Rephaim. So David inquired of the Lord, and he answered, "Do not go straight up, but circle around behind them and attack them in the front of the poplar trees." Verse 24. As soon as you hear the sound of marching in the tops of the poplar trees, move quickly, because that will mean the Lord has gone out in front of you to strike the Philistine army. So David did as the Lord commanded him, and he struck down the Philistines all the way from Gibeon to Gezer. That completes chapter 5. Alright, chapter 6. The ark brought to Jerusalem. Verse 1. David again brought together all the able young men of Israel, 30,000. He and all his men went to Bahalah in Judah to bring up from there the ark of God, which is called by the name. So it has the letter F. So I look at my footnotes, F. It says Hebrew, Septuagint, and Vulgate do not have the name. The name of the Lord Almighty, who is enthroned between the cherubim on the ark. They set the ark of God in a new cart and brought it from the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. Uzzah and Ahio, sons of Abinadab, were guiding the new cart with the ark of God on it. G. Dead scrolls and some Septuagint manuscripts. Masoretic text cart, and they brought it with the ark of God from the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. I was reading the footnotes there. And Ahio was walking in front of it. Verse 5. David and all Israel were celebrating for all their might before the Lord, with castanets, harps, lyres, timbrels, sistrums, and cymbals. Wow, I just had an appetite for like some type of bakery, some type of like ponce bread, or I don't know. I just got the appetite. It just hit me. Verse 6. When they came to the threshing floor of Nakon, Uzzah reached out and took hold of the ark of God before the oxen stumbled. The Lord's anger burned against Uzzah because of his irreverent act. Therefore God struck him down, and he died there beside the ark of God. Then David was angry because the Lord's wrath had broken out against Uzzah, and to this day that place is called Perez Uzzah, which means outbreak against Uzzah. I read it in the footnotes again. All right. Verse 9, David was afraid of the Lord that day and said, how can the ark of the Lord ever come to me? He was not willing to take the ark of the Lord to be with him in the city of David. Instead, he took it to the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite. The ark of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom and Gittite for 3 months, and the Lord blessed him and his entire household. Now King David was told, the Lord has blessed the household of Obed-Edom and everything he has, because of the ark of God. So David went to bring up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with rejoicing. When those who were carrying the ark of the Lord had taken 6 steps, he sacrificed a bull and a fattened calf. Verse 14, wearing a linen ephod, David was dancing before the Lord with all his might, while he and all Israel were bringing up the ark of the Lord with shouts and the sounds of trumpets. As the ark of the Lord was entering the city of David, Michal, daughter of Saul, watched from a window. And when she saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, she despised him in her heart. They brought the ark of the Lord and set it in its place inside the tent that David had pitched for it. And David sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings before the Lord. Verse 18. After he had finished sacrificing the burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord Almighty. Then he gave a loaf of bread, a cake of dates, some cake, and a cake of raisins to each person in the whole crowd of Israelites, both men and women. Oh my gosh, some chocolate cake sounds good. What is it called? A chocolate devil cake where it looked like small Hershey Kiss, like very small chocolate Hershey Kiss pieces on top that look like Hershey Kisses, but I don't know if they are. They're all over the top. It's all chocolate. Oh my goodness, this sounds so good. And all the people went to their homes. Verse 20, when David returned home to bless his household, Michal, daughter of Saul, came out to meet him and said, how the king of Israel has distinguished himself today, going around half naked in full view of the slave girls of his servants, as any vulgar fellow would. David said to Michal, it was before the Lord who chose me rather than your father or anyone from his house when he appointed me ruler over the Lord's people, Israel. I will celebrate before the Lord. I will become even more undignified than this, and I will be humiliated in my own eyes. But by these slave girls you spoke of, I will be held in honor. And Michal, daughter of Saul, had no children to the day of her death. That completes chapter 6. I gotta move my fan towards me because I'm getting hot. Let's keep this rolling. I'm on a mission. Read this word. All right. Chapter 7, God's promise to David. Verse 1. After the king was settled in his palace and the Lord had given him rest for all his enemies around him, he said to Nathan the prophet, here I am, living in a house of cedar, while the ark of God remains in the tent. Nathan replied to the king, whatever you have in mind, go ahead and do it, for the Lord is with you. But that night the word of the Lord came to Nathan, saying, verse 5, go and tell my servant David, this is what the Lord says. Are you the one to build me a house to dwell in? Have I not dwelt in a house from the day I brought the Israelites up out of Egypt to this day? I have been moving from place to place with a tent as my dwelling. Wherever I have moved with all the Israelites, did I ever say to any of the rulers whom I commanded to shepherd my people Israel, why have you not built me a house of cedar? Now then, tell my servant David, this is what the Lord Almighty says. I took you from the pasture, from tending the flock, and appointed you ruler over my people Israel. I have been with you wherever you have gone, and I have cut off all your enemies from before you. Now I will make your name great, like the names of the greatest men on earth. Verse 10, And I will provide a place for my people Israel, and will plant them so that they can have a home of their own and no longer be disturbed. Wicked people would not oppress them anymore, as they did at the beginning, and have done ever since the time I appointed leaders over my people. Wait, it has the letter A over leaders, traditional judges. Over my people Israel, I will also give you rest from all your enemies. The Lord declares to you that the Lord himself will establish a house for you. When your days are over and you rest with your ancestors, I will raise up your offering to succeed you, your own flesh and blood, and I will establish his kingdom. He is the one who will build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he will be my son. When he does wrong, I will punish him with the rod wielded by men, with floggings inflicted by human hands, but my love will never be taken away from him, as I took it away from Saul. When I removed from before you, your house and your kingdom will endure forever before me. Your throne will be established forever. Nathan reported to David all the words of this entire revelation. David's prayer, verse 18. Then King David went in and sat before the Lord, and he said, Who am I, sovereign Lord, and what is my family that you have brought me this far? I just got chills reading that, man. Like, I'm getting goosebumps. Verse 19. And as if this were not enough in your sight, sovereign Lord, you have also spoken about the future of the house of your servant, about this decree. Sovereign Lord is for a mere human. It has the letter C. I'm going to look at my footnotes. Or for the human race. Okay. Verse 20. What more can David say to you? For you know your servant, sovereign Lord. That's how I feel, man. I'm like, Lord, like, what can I say? Like, I'm not even worthy. Like, you know my thoughts. Like, you know what I'm going to pray. Like, you know what I'm going to do. Like, verse 21. For the sake of your word and according to your will, you have done this great thing and made it known to your servant. How great you are, sovereign Lord. There is no one like you, and there is no God but you, as we have heard with our own ears. And who is like your people Israel, the one nation on earth that God went out to redeem as a people for himself, and to make a name for yourself, and to perform great and awesome wonders by driving out nations and their gods from before your people, whom you redeemed from Egypt. D. See Septuagint and First Chronicles, Hebrew wonders for your land and before your people, whom you redeemed from Egypt, from the nations of their gods. Verse 24, you have established your people Israel as your very own forever, and you, Lord, have become their God. All right, real quick, Pastor Perry Stone, if you don't know him, you can look him up. He has a lot of YouTube content. He has a YouTube channel, and he's leading an Israel trip this November, which I am still thinking about going in for Thanksgiving break time. So, yeah, I'm still thinking about doing that and going to Israel. So that'd be cool. Where was I? Verse 25. And now, Lord God, keep forever the promise you have made concerning your servant and his house. Do as you promised, so that your name will be great forever. Then people will say, the Lord Almighty is God over Israel, and the house of your servant David will be established in your sight. Lord Almighty, God of Israel, you have revealed this to your servant, saying, I will build a house for you. So your servant has found courage to pray this prayer to you. Sovereign Lord, you are God. Your covenant is trustworthy, and you have promised these good things to your servant. Now be pleased to bless the house of your servant, that it may continue forever in your sight. For you, sovereign Lord, have spoken, and with your blessing the house of your servant will be blessed forever. That completes chapter 7. Chapter 8, David's victories. Verse 1. In the course of time, David defeated the Philistines and subdued them, and he took Metheg Ammah from the control of the Philistines. David also defeated the Moabites. He made them lie down on the ground and measured them off with a length of cord. Every 2 lengths of them were put to death, and the third length was allowed to live. What? So the Moabites became subject to David and brought him tribute. Moreover, David defeated Hadazer, son of Rehob, king of Zobah, when he went to restore his monument at the Euphrates River. David captured 1,000 of his chariots, 7,000 charioteers, and 20,000 foot soldiers. He hamstrung all but 100 of the chariot horses. When the Arameans of Damascus came to help Hadazer, king of Zobah, David struck down 22,000 of them. He put garrisons in the Aramean kingdom of Damascus, and the Arameans became subject to him and brought tribute. The Lord gave David victory wherever he went. Verse 7, David took the gold shields that belonged to the officers of Hadazer and brought them to Jerusalem. From Tebah and Berothai, towns that belonged to Hadazer, King David took a great quantity of bronze. When Tou, king of Hamath, heard that David had defeated the entire army of Hadadezer, he sent his son Joram to King David to greet him and congratulate him on his victory in battle over Hadadezer, who had been at war with Tou. Joram brought with him articles of silver, of gold, and of bronze. Verse 11, King David dedicated these articles to the Lord, as he had done with the silver and gold from all the nations he had subdued, Edom and Moab, the Ammonites and the Philistines and Amalek. He also dedicated the plunder taken from Hadazer, son of Rehob, king of Zobah. And David became famous after he returned from striking down 18,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt. He put garrisons throughout Edom, and all the Edomites became subject to David. The Lord gave David victory wherever he went. David's officials, verse 15. David reigned over all Israel, doing what was just and right for all his people. Joab, son of Zeruiah, was over the army. Jehoshaphat, son of Ahilud, was recorder. Verse 17. Zadok, son of Ahitub, and Ahimelech, son of Abiathar, were priests. Sariah was secretary. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, was over the Kerethites and Pelethites, and David's sons were priests. F. Or were chief officials. See Septuagint and Targum. See also. For the first time, I'm actually starting to look at these letters that are next to these verses and starting to read the footnotes, so it's pretty cool. That completes chapter 8. It's time for a drink break. Don't go away. Oh, man. Man. Today's Thursday. You know what that means? Boneless deal Thursdays, Buffalo Wild Wings. That actually sounds really good right now. Like, it sounds really good. Super good, dude. All right. Chapter 9. David and Mephibosheth. Verse 1. David asked, Is there anyone still left of the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake? Now there was a servant of Saul's household named Ziba. They summoned him to appear before David, and the king said to him, Are you Ziba? At your service, he replied. See, there's just certain people that just have certain special scenarios in their life, right? Like, he asked, is there anyone left of Saul's basically kingdom, right? And, oh yeah, we have this guy. He didn't know, probably. He didn't know King David was going to talk to him, probably, like, he wants to talk to me. Oh man, that's got to be from God, that's got to be, you know, that's cool. Like, I have this, you're focused on your life, but now you have this alternate scenario where someone comes in and just shakes everything up. My goodness gracious, that fascinates me. It's, you know what I related to? There's two things. Okay, I related to Hercules, the Disney movie Hercules, where Hades gets control of his men, right? His bad guys, right? And they're going to destroy Zeus's kingdom or whatever, right? And he says, Hades goes to one of the guys. He's like, not you, the one-eyed guy. He's like, you come with me. I have a very special mission for you. That guy didn't know. He was focused on the task like everyone else. But Hades called him and said, no, I got a different alternative route for you. It fascinates me. And another one is the game, I like to call it Biohazard. I think that's a better name, aka Resident Evil. It's called Biohazard in Japan. And in that game it's also, there's different scenarios that you can take, and I just find that so cool. It fascinates me. It just fascinates me. And even back to my other videos when I talked about Super Mario, you just find this portal, what are those things, the tubes that you go down to, and then you just off to a different world, right? Like, I'm telling you, it fascinates me, man. It fascinates me. All right. At your service, he replied. The king asked, is there no one still alive from the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness, God's kindness? Ziba answered the king, there is still a son of Jonathan. He is lame in both feet. Where is he? The king asked. Ziba answered, he is at the house of Machir, son of Amiel, in Lo Debar. Man, they knew everybody. Verse 5, so King David had him brought from Lo Debar, from the house of Machir, son of Amiel. When Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David, he bowed down to pay him honor. David said, Mephibosheth, at your service, he replied. Don't be afraid. David said to him, for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table. See, look at that. Wow. Verse 8, Mephibosheth bowed down and said, what is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me? Then the king summoned Ziba, Saul's steward, and said to him, I have given your master's grandson everything that belonged to Saul and his family. You and your sons and your servants are to farm the land for him and bring in the crops, so that your master's grandson may be provided for. And Mephibosheth, grandson of your master, will always eat at my table. Parentheses. Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Close parentheses. Then Ziba said to the king, your servant will do whatever, my lord, the king commands his servant to do. So Mephibosheth ate at David's table. Letter G. Septuagint Hebrew. My what? Okay. Okay, we'll read that again. Verse 11, then Ziba said to the king, your servant will do whatever my lord the king commands his servant to do. So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. Wow, look at that. Now you're eating at the king's table. King David. Wow. Verse 12, Mephibosheth had a young son named Micah, and all the members of Ziba's household were servants of Mephibosheth. And Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem because he always ate at the king's table. He was lame in both feet. Wow, and that completes chapter 9. Wow. Pretty cool. Chapter 10. David defeats the Ammonites. Verse 1. In this course of time, the king of the Ammonites died, and his son Hanun succeeded him as king. David thought, I will show kindness to Hanun, son of Nahash, just as his father showed kindness to me. So David sent a delegation to express his sympathy to Hanun concerning his father. When David's men came to the land of the Ammonites, the Ammonite commander said to Hanun the Lord, "Do you think David is honoring your father by sending envoys to you to express sympathy? Hasn't David sent them to you only to explore the city and spy it out and overthrow it?" So Hanun seized David's envoys, shaved off half of each man's beard, cut off their garments at the buttocks, and sent them away. Verse 5. When David was told about this, he sent messengers to meet the men, for they were greatly humiliated. The king said, "Stay at Jericho till your beards have grown, and then come back." When the Ammonites realized that they had become obnoxious to David, they hired 20,000 Armenian foot soldiers from Beth Rehob and Zobah, as well as the king of Makkah with 1,000 men, and also 12,000 men from Tob. On hearing this, David sent Joab out with the entire army of fighting men. The Ammonites came out, drew up in battle formation at the entrance of their city gate, while the Armenians of Zobah and Rehob and the men of Tob and Makkah were by themselves in the open country. Joab saw that there were battle lines in front of him and behind him, so he selected some of the best troops in Israel and deployed them against the Armenes. Verse 10, he put the rest of the men under the command of Abishai, his brother, and deployed them against the Ammonites. Joab said, "If the Armenians are too strong for me, then you are to come to my rescue. But if the Ammonites are too strong for you, then I will come to rescue. Be strong and let us fight bravely for our people and the cities of our God. The Lord will do what is good in his sight." Verse 13, then Joab and the troops with him advanced to fight the Arameans, and they fled before him. When the Ammonites realized that the Arameans were fleeing, they fled before Abishai and went inside the city. So Joab returned from fighting the Ammonites and came to Jerusalem. Verse 15, after the Arameans saw that they had been routed by Israel, they regrouped. Hadadezer had Arameans brought from beyond the Euphrates River. They went to Helam. How did I know? I just glanced at chapter 11 because I was going to, earlier before, because I was going to finish at chapter 10, right? And I'm like, maybe the next chapter is what I think it is. And it is. Hold on. Verse 17, when David was told of this, he gathered all Israel, crossed the Jordan, and went to Helam. The Arameans formed their battle lines to meet David and fought against him, but they fled before Israel, and David killed 700 of their chariots and 40,000 of their foot soldiers. He also struck down Shobach, the commander of the army, and he died there. When all the kings who were vassals of Hadadezer saw that they had been routed by Israel, they made peace with the Israelites and became subject to them. So the Arameans were afraid to help the Ammonites anymore. And that completes chapter 10. I gotta keep going now. David and Bathsheba. Oh my goodness. Alright. Chapter 11. Y'all ready for this? Alright. David and Bathsheba. Chapter 11, verse 1. In the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. They destroyed the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained in Jerusalem. One evening, David got up from his bed and walked around on the roof of the palace. From the roof, he saw a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful, and David sent someone to find out about her. The man said, "She is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, and the wife of Uriah the Hittite." Then David sent messengers to get her. She came to him, and he slept with her. Parentheses, now she was purifying herself from her monthly uncleanness. Close parentheses. Then she went back home. The woman conceived and sent word to David saying, I am pregnant. Verse 6, so David sent this word to Joab, send me Uriah the Hittite. And Joab sent him to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked him how Joab was, how the soldiers were, and how the war was going. Then David said to Uriah, go down to your house and wash your feet. So Uriah left the palace, and a gift from the king was sent after him. But Uriah slept at the entrance to the palace with all the master's servants, and did not go down to his house. Verse 10, David was told, Uriah did not go home. So he asked Uriah, haven't you just come from a military campaign? Why didn't you go home? Uriah said to David, the ark and Israel and Judah are staying in tents, and my commander Joab and my lord's men are camped in the open country. How could I go to my house to eat and drink and make love to my wife? As surely as you live, I will not do such a thing. Then David said to him, stay here one more day, and tomorrow I will send you back. So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. Verse 13, at David's invitation, he ate and drank with him, and David made him drunk. But in the evening, Uriah went out to sleep on his mat among his master's servants. He did not go home. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it with Uriah. In it, he wrote, put Uriah out in front where the fighting is fiercest. Then withdraw from him, so he will be struck down and die. Verse 16, so while Joab had the city under siege, he put Uriah at a place where he knew the strongest defenders were. When the men of the city came out and fought against Joab, some of the men in David's army fell. Moreover, Uriah the Hittite died. Joab sent David a full account of the battle. He instructed the messenger, when you have finished giving the king this account of the battle, the king's anger may flare up, and he may ask you, why did you get so close to the city to fight? Didn't you know they would shoot arrows from the wall? Verse 21, who killed Abimelech, son of Jerub-Beshith, letter B, also known as Jerubbaal, that is Gideon. That's right. Didn't a woman drop an upper millstone on him from the wall, so that he died in the Thebez? Why did you get so close to the wall? If he asks you this, then say to him, moreover, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead. Verse 22, the messenger sent out, and when he arrived, he told David everything Joab had sent him to say. The messenger said to David, the men overpowered us and came out against us in the open, but we drove them back to the entrance of the city gate. Then the archers shot arrows at your servants from the wall, and some of the king's men died. Moreover, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead. David told the messenger, say this to Joab, don't let this upset you. The sword devours one as well as another. Press the attack against the city and destroy it. Say this to encourage Joab. Verse 26, when Uriah's wife heard that her husband was dead, she mourned for him. After the time of mourning was over, David had her brought to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. But the thing David had done displeased the Lord. That completes chapter 11. And that completes the reading for today. Thank you, God, for your word. All right. That is all.